The development of Stranger Things, like how long had you had sort of general ideas? Had it ever been a movie before it became a TV series?
The very kernel of the idea was a film, a discarded film idea. It was during the time of where found footage was a big deal. So we were just spitballing a bunch of ideas, and we wrote them all down. It's a reminder to write down your ideas, even the ones you're not sure about or that don't click. And it was based basically a found footage film set in the 80s about something called the Montauk Project, which was a conspiracy theory in Montauk, New York, and it involved portals and to other dimensions and monsters and experiments on people and children, and it all was an offshoot of MK Ultra. So we thought it was a cool premise, but we weren't fans of found footage, and we didn't really know what to do with that idea, so we just discarded it. And then we saw the film Prisoners,
one of the
Denis
best.
Villeneuve. Which,
I mean, this must have been
such
like
a good drama,
5 years later. By
5
the way.
years later, yeah. So that was, we just put that away, shoved it in a drawer. We saw Prisoners many years later, and as we were walking out, it was during this time of television, like Matt was saying, where we felt the tide turning, and we said, well, wouldn't it be interesting, we love Prisoners in the tone, and we thought, wouldn't it be interesting to see a story about a kidnapped child, but that was a longer form movie, because we could have kept watching Prisoners with those actors in that tone for another 6 hours easily. And we got excited about that, but as, nerds, we went back to our, old idea of monsters and said, well, what if it's a supernatural kidnapping? And then we started thinking about Poltergeist, and it just sort of, it snowballed from there, but it came together actually pretty quickly once we sort of smushed these two ideas together.
What was the pitching process? Like, what did you actually have at that stage?
Well, we wrote the script, which we normally are quite slow, but that came very quickly, which we thought was a good sign.
Pilot or like the whole
pilot,
series?
Just the pilot. We just had one script. We developed a pitch book. It was about, you can actually find it online. It's floating around somewhere. It's about maybe 20 pages, a lot of pictures of films from the 80s. And that was all we had. We sent it around to various producers. And we ended up landing at kind of, well, I won't go into the full history, but so we ended up landing with a surprising producer, which was Sean Levy, because and his company 21 Laps. And Sean Levy was known for mostly family films, like Night at the Museum.
They'd never done television.
Never done television, never done genre.
But we knew his producer, Dan Cohen, who was, again, just a general meeting from years ago, but he spoke our language. He's just a movie nerd. And we loved all the same movies. His favorite movie's Breaking Away. And we just connected with Dan. And so he immediately read the script, understood it. We didn't know Sean at the time, but then Sean read the script and we met with him, and he just loved the project. And again,
they got it, right?
There were other companies that made more sense from just sort of, because again, at the time he hadn't done any television, was not known for the horror genre or anything scary at all or serious. But we just knew he understood the script and he believed in us. And so from then, once we brought them on, we took it around to the town and just got a bunch of no's.
I remember a lot of the concern was the fact that it was set in the 1980s. We were told nobody wants a period piece, and certainly nobody wants anything set in the 1980s. And then the other part of it was that it was a show starring kids that was not for kids. So that was also something, because there had been nothing like that had been successful. I mean, hadn't been tried though. That was kind of my point. So I remember at the end of that first week after we got like our 10th rejection, including from FX. I think FX hurt the most because we had just we thought we had a real chance there because we had just done that Shyamalan show with them, Wayward Pines, and we had a great experience. So that once they passed, I kind of deflated. I thought that was kind of the end. Our agent called us and said, I remember he said, "This is, listen, it's a special project, and we'll find a special home for it." And I went, "What is wrong with our child?" It's our, and then somehow, suddenly, it was kind of a lot of luck involved. But because we had one of our agents was meeting with an executive from Netflix about a completely separate project, and the Netflix executive said, one of the things they're looking for is something starring younger characters that's in the supernatural space. And then he goes, I might have the script for you. So anyway, long story short, we ended up at
Did it happen very
ended up
quickly?
at Netflix. It happened quick.
Very quickly from that moment on. Because we didn't even submit the script to Netflix.
No.
Because we thought, or our agents at the time, because, they had only done House of Cards, Orange is the New Black. We were just like, there's not even a chance in hell they would do this. But what we didn't know is that they were on the cusp of about to produce a ton of content. And so once they found this show, which filled this void that they felt they needed, they quickly not only bought the project, but greenlit it straight to series. So really for us, it was his dream come true.
Yeah, and then it became like a flagship. What was the sort of process like? What were you trying to achieve with the first season, and then what was the the end goal, I suppose, in making sure each season feels different, but you're working towards something?
Well, I think some of that comes out of us looking at the movie sequels, not television shows, but movie sequels, and what are the successful ones, and specifically, the first ones that obviously come to mind are for us are Cameron's, Aliens and T2, which is you're not losing what is at the heart of those series, but you're taking it in new directions, and you are changing in sometimes the tone in a way, and so. I think a mistake that people tend to make with films is they're trying to build out, an expansive universe, but they haven't even made one good film yet. Each season, yes, we have some, long-term things that we want to achieve over the course of the series, but mostly we're going, how do we make the best season that we can possibly make now? And how do we make it something we're excited, a story that we're excited to tell? And part of that is going, well, we're going to change it up. It would have been so simple and easy to take the blueprint of season 1 and just rinse and repeat and do like Home Alone 2 and just do it again and again and again. But if we had done that, I'm pretty confident that we would not be here 10 years later talking to you. The show would have just it would have been diminishing returns. And so we just wanted to keep shaking it up, keep taking chances and swing for the fences. And of course, not every chance you take works out perfectly, but I think that's much more interesting than if you just are you're just repeating the same thing over and over again.
How did you get into the setting such a specific mood and the blending of like horror and the 80s and the action thriller and the the kid friendship movies? Like what was the process in terms of building that from the very first instance?
Well, I mean, when we were building, and it's mentioned in our lookbook where we were talking about different types of movies that each generation in that season was in, and that was part of what excited us about telling this as a television show, because we're like, we can do something that a movie could never do. A movie could tell one of these stories. They could tell the story of Hopper, they could tell the story of the kids, or they could tell the story of the teens, but they certainly couldn't do all three, and they couldn't mash them all together. So
there's just not enough time.
There's not enough time. So we saw as like Jonathan and Nancy were like, they're in Nightmare on Elm Street. That's the movie that they're in. The kids are in E.T. They're in a totally separate movie from our teens. And then the adults are in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. So everyone is in their separate movie, and we love the idea of just weaving all of those together, and you're mixing and mashing, and they all come together to form a coherent whole. But we loved, and that's sort of where we started to come up with this idea that each season and each storyline is in its own genre, and that allows you to pivot very quickly from something like, you're in a romantic comedy, and then suddenly the next minute you're in a straight up horror movie, and we love that swinging of tones.
Just a little bit about music, maybe, because that's obviously another huge part of the show. Like, how do you pick tracks for? The original soundtrack, leaning into that sort of side of things, like, where does that all come from?
I mean, just talking about the score for a second, like that, was one of the things I think we decided on very, very early on, which is that we wanted to have a synth score. And part of that was us feeling like, we weren't going to have a big budget for a large orchestra, and it was always going to feel like sort of second-rate John Williams, that we were never going to compete with that. And it always feel like kind of, it was never going to reach that level, so it was going to be disappointing. And we started to play around. When we developed kind of a sizzle reel to help sell the show, and we threw some John Carpenter music on top of E.T., and it was cool. I mean, first of all, it's not that hard to turn E.T. into a horror film because it's kind of creepy as it is, but it really made it quite scary. And we thought that was it was a really good, cool tone. So that was kind of a proof of concept where we go, oh, this is cool. So we found these synth composers, Kyle and Michael, who, I guess they weren't really composers. They just had a synth band. They were selling used synthesizers, and we brought them on to compose. And I think that gave the show, a unique identity. We're really into film music, and we think that that it's such an essential part of cinema, of cinema and visual storytelling. So anyway, so we spent a long time, and we continue to spend a long time on music. I would say even in editorial, about 50% of our time in there is spent on music and finding the right music.
And then soundtrack, we try to, I think the most effective uses of the soundtrack is when we're writing into the script, as in we're tying it into both character and the narrative.
Like Running Up the Hill.
Running Up the Hill being the most obvious example, but we started in season 1 with The Clash, Should I Stay or Should I Go? And we've tried to sort of continue that, of making sure when we're doing occasionally we'll do a needle drop on a scene and just be like, well, this just feels, cool, Africa by Toto or whatever. We'll be like, well, it's just it's a great song, and we just want to put it in there. But generally, the most success that we've had, Running Up the Hill being the biggest success, is you're going, this is fitting for Max in her emotional arc and character journey, and also narratively, because it's how she's able to escape Vecna in his mindscape. So that's what we're really trying to do with each season, and this season is the same way. There's a bunch of big songs that were written into the script specifically, and that comes about letting the narrative tell us what the song should be, as opposed to just going, I'm nostalgic for this song, or I really like this one.
Nice. Was there any point in your careers where you thought, I'm not sure if this is going to happen?
Oh my God.
Like, what did you do to get past that? Because obviously you're now at a stage where you've done some really amazing work. But
your 20s were hard, are hard, especially because it was hard to get people to take you seriously. And Ross and I we're not from Hollywood. We didn't know anybody in Hollywood, so we spent a long time just trying to make connections and trying to meet the right people, trying to find a way to get an agent, and we just kept hacking. And I always, we didn't have a safety net, and we had nowhere to go, which I think it was terrifying, but I think that was helpful, because if we kind of gave up, we were absolutely screwed. We had developed no skills beyond this one skill. We wrote a lot of really bad scripts, and so you just I think you just have to keep working. I was like, we just wrote. We wrote on the weekends. We wrote a bunch of crap until finally we wrote something we thought worked. It was pretty clear, I think, when we wrote the first script that worked, which was Hidden. And we went, oh, I think we can get this made. But then we did get it made, and so your career is filled with up.
But I would say the two things that we did that changed our lives, which was writing Hidden, which is the first script that we sold, and then Stranger Things, both came at extreme low points in moments of desperation.
Whenever I'm talking to people who are trying to break in, first of all, like, you got to be able to handle rejection. We know a lot of it feels very personal and hurtful when you're rejected, because you pour your heart into this. But the other thing that we were doing that was a mistake for the longest time is we were writing we were obsessed with what was selling in the industry. We'd read, Deadline and Hollywood Reporter, and we'd see what specs were selling and so on. And so we were writing and what movies were working. And this is how we were developing a found footage movie, and then we didn't like found footage. And when we first found success was when we stopped paying attention to any of that. At a certain point, I said, I'm not going to look at the trades anymore. And we just wrote what we thought was cool and what we were interested in. And the first time we did that We wrote Hidden. It wrote itself very easily because we were writing something that we loved and were passionate about, and then that sold. So and then Stranger Things obviously made no sense in the marketplace, which again a lot of people told us. You know, we even one of our agents said to eliminate the kids.
Yeah.
So you just don't listen to that.
Yeah.
And just write what you love.
That's amazing advice to end on. Thank you so much.
Yes,
It's been such a wonderful chat.
Yeah, that was fun. Thanks,
congratulations.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, man.
Yeah, thank